some of the things that we're working on over the next kind of 12 months.
It's been a real pleasure for you to come and join us. As people know, I never stand on my own. I always have someone else with me. It's lovely to have you to talk a little bit about exercise. We'll come to that in a moment. But I've been asked today to talk about a partnership of responsibility for good forward planning for our own health. And thinking about what that means within the context of what we've been talking about, but also in the wider context around what we're trying to do in my role as a GP, as in my role in my long-term conditions lead, information management technology lead, and patient engagement, patient empowerment lead for the CCG. And it starts with thinking about, most of us don't actually think about health until suddenly something happens. Most people don't really think about that something terrible is going to happen, and then suddenly a chest pain happens, or they've got a tummy ache or whatever it is, and then suddenly they want everything happening instantly. And if it doesn't happen, who do I complain to? Who do I go to? There's got to be someone else I can go and blame. And that's very much where we are at the moment, very often in society. What we're here, we of course, this audience here isn't there. This audience here is starting to think, well, there is something else that we can do. Maybe some of that is about what we individually do, what is it that we can do as a family, what can we do as a community. What I'd now like to do is just invite Marilyn to come along and start with thinking about how do we move from a world where we're just waiting and think everything's going to be okay until everything sort of something goes wrong, into a different world.
Right. This is Harry. Harry's my grandson, and he has severe haemophilia A. When this was taken, Harry was 3, and to me, this is the future of healthcare. I was phoned one day, Harry's medicated at home, and Harry wants you, he's got to have he's injected twice a week. So I went along and he went, come in Grandma, I'm just mixing, take the tourniquet, come on, get the cushion, I'm going to scream now, and he does. But he's already, as you can see, he's mixing his medicine. He draws it up into the syringe. He tries to put the needle on, but we normally end up doing that. And then he prepares his arm and he holds the swab ready when the needle comes. And it's all, because it's an infusion, it's painful. It is painful. But Harry doesn't want Ophelia. But we tell him he's got it, and this is what we've got to do. And his condition is so well managed at home that the lead nurse at Manchester Children's Hospital has said his condition is that severe. When they have the case conferences every week, they expect Harry to have been in at least once a week. Since he's gone on prophylaxis, he's never been in. My daughter and her husband and myself, we manage Harry. Now, last week he had 3 incidents where he fell on the same knee. His knee is his weak point. And he was limping, so he had 3 injections, 3 days running. But my daughter was really, really worried because we couldn't see a bleed. So I advised her on the Monday to go down to clinic, and she went down to clinic. She phoned them first, and they said, no, come straight down. The reason we couldn't find his bleed was it was behind his kneecap. But she'd done absolutely everything that the hospital would have been able to do. So she's cost the hospital no time whatsoever. He is so well managed at home that he doesn't visit the hospital. And to me, like Bruce, as he was growing up, his self-management makes you take ownership. Harry knows if he runs, if he's an idiot, he's going to get a needle stuck in him. And he doesn't like it because it's sore. We envisage by the time Harry's 6 that he will be injecting himself. When he has a fall at school, when I say no cost, my daughter's had to give up a very good job to look after him and to be on call for him 24/7. But at school, when he has a fall, they call his sister, who's 8. And she comes along and she examines him, like she'd seen Mummy do and walk Harry, and then she'll go, no, he'll be fine with an ice pack, or I think we better get Mummy needs an injection. And to me, and I thank Dr. Hannan because I'm very proud of Harry. It's not an easy condition. Yes, I am doing a skydive to raise funds for haemophilia, not petrified. But to me, this is the way forward. This is self-care. And if we can teach our children from 3 years old to look after their bodies and to take responsibility for their health and the conditions they've got as Paul said, I think we'll be a lot better health service. Thanks. Well done.
So let's go back to how do we get to that point there, and how do we get a 4-year-old child who's not accessing the records at the moment. But actually, it's not about access to the records. It's actually about this idea of a trusting relationship, this partnership of trust. And there's a picture of Margaret, whose memorial we're doing today for. And Margaret taught me lots and lots of things. And one of the things that she taught me was the fact that there are 3 experts in the room. Yes, there's me as a doctor, it might be the nurse, it might be the pharmacist, the allied health professional, whatever it is. And we've got expertise in terms of how to take a history, how to examine, how to come up with a plan of action, differential diagnosis and whatnot. But Margaret's got expertise as well, and her expertise is about the symptoms, how it's affecting her, how it's affecting her family, what's been happening with her. She's the one who presents in A&E or out of hours or wherever else it might be. And she'll have fears and concerns just as the family might do. And those are things that she knows about. Now she's trusting me to give the best that I can offer for in terms of medicine, but I'm trusting her to provide me with as much information about what's important for her, her values, her experiences and all those sorts of things. And of course, we've got that computer system, and I might not know Margaret from Adam or Eve, but when I put her name into the computer, up comes a medical record, and in there are all the problems, the medications, the consultations that I've had with her, consultations she's had with other patients, with other staff, test results, letters, and all those sorts of things. And of course, I can look at that, and I can try and work out where to go from there. I can look at things like knowledge websites, such as the Map of Medicine, or clinical knowledge summaries, or NICE guidance, or whatever it might be. Or I might choose, and it used to be choosing book, it's now called e-referrals. If I'm going to refer her off to the hospital to see a back surgeon or whatever it might be, I'd be able to find out where the appointments are. And that computer system is helping me. That's the 3rd expert in the room. But if we were to turn that computer screen around so the patient can see the same information as we can, then we move into this very exciting space, which I call the partnership of trust, where we're both looking at the same information, we're sharing knowledge. It's the knowledge that saves lives. It's not the data, but it's the knowledge, the combined knowledge that we bring together. Okay, well, we started doing this back in 2005, so 10 years down the line, this is our latest data. In fact, it's already out of date, because we're already starting to find that 5 or 6 patients a day are signing up, sometimes more than that. But overall, we've got 37% of our patient population now accessing their records. You can see the age group from 0 right through to 90 plus. The oldest patient that we've now got is 101 years old. You can see that the majority are between 25 and 65, although the younger kids are now starting to rise up, and even some of the older ones are. If we look at it slightly differently in terms of symptoms or conditions, we have a policy that says we want to encourage everybody to have access to their records. But if you look at our asthma, it's 43% now. COPD, 34%, diabetes, 43%. Scary diagnoses, cancer, 40% of the patients can now access their records. This is incredible. It's overall 37% down here. Look at that. If you've got anxiety and depression, that's 64%. That's indicating to us that we've broken the ice now. This has now become part of what we do. It's part of normality. It's part of what we do at all medical centres. Another one there, very significant. More than 50% of our patients with rheumatoid arthritis have got access to their records. Back pain, 46%. Look at the numbers. We're talking large numbers of patients now signing up. Even people with minor ailments, 39% of them have got access. In December, 11 patients out of 25 that got admitted into hospital, 44% of them had access to their records. So in theory, they could have shared that record with whoever they wanted in the hospital. What about health inequalities? Well, look at that. 20% of the patients with learning disabilities have got access to their records. Just as an idea, in this audience, how many people have got access to their records here? So we've got 4 people, which is probably about 10% in this audience, and yet 20% of our patients with learning disabilities have got access. And this is an audience that's 5 standard deviations ahead of the rest of the country, which makes us then start to ask the question, who's the one with the learning difficulties? Right. Let's go further than that. I learned very, very early on, we've got a very large Bengali population, and within about 6 months of starting, I could see that these Bengali patients were not signing up for access to their records. So I started to think about what can we do to support that particular group of people. We hit a very significant milestone about 6 weeks ago. When you look at this, 37% of our total population has access, and 37% of our Bengali patients have access. And the question that I asked on Twitter was, what happens, and this is going to happen very soon, where if you're Bengali in my practice, you're more likely to have signed up than the general population. What does that mean? Does that mean now that the general population, in other words, people like me and you, notice how I can put my hand up because my GP doesn't offer me access to records. Does that mean that we become the endangered species? Because these people are signing up because we're putting the right level of support in place. In which case, who's going to support us? Who's going to encourage us to start doing this? Because this is now what's happening. We are reversing those health inequalities, at least with regards to access to information. That's a really scary thought where we start to think, because no one ever thought that would ever happen. We're proving that it can be done if you put the right level of support in place. But what is that level of support? And I'm going to take people to a slightly different place. Because up till now, in all the talks that I've ever given, I've always talked about a partnership of trust. And me and Richard, I can't say Richard, there you are, Richard. Me and Richard often talked about this because we said, well, okay, you have a trusting relationship, but trust will only get you so far. You might trust somebody, but you might still continue doing something else. So now I'm going to bring the second point here, which is then we now need to have this partnership of responsibility. What are you happy to do as a patient, as a carer, as a family member? What am I going to do? And you can imagine that if you're a very activated sort of patient, and we've just heard about a very activated one, there might be a great deal of responsibility that that child, that family are quite happy to take. Now, I'm not abrogating my responsibility as a doctor, so I'm not saying that I'm going to give it to you and it's not mine. But actually, you can see how we can start to share some of this responsibility. And it's part of that concept of shared decision making. What are you happy to do? What do we do? Are we happy to do that? So that's the second partnership that we need to think about. And then there's another one, because you might agree on what you're responsible for, but actually nothing changes. So we've also got to have this partnership of behaviour as well. And I think these are the three ideas that we need to bring together. We have to have a trusting relationship, but we also need to think about the responsibilities and where they lie, and increasingly we're going to start sharing some of that stuff, whether with the individual or with the community. And then there's this other one around the behaviour changes. What are we going to do? How are we going to change our behaviours? And believe you me, the medical profession is very risk averse. So at the moment, I'm having those conversations behind closed doors where people are worried about where that responsibility lies. But actually, if we start to share some of this stuff, it becomes easier to manage. And if we do it in the way that Brian was talking about, and engaging with the wider community, then some really, really amazing things are going to start to happen. Now, let's just go further than that. What's more dangerous, cigarettes or sugar? Anybody? You're all reading the slides, aren't you?
Yes.
Tobacco is highly addictive. You love the way it makes you feel, the satisfaction it gives you. You crave it. You need it to get through the day. It stimulates an integral part of your brain. It silently and narrows your blood vessels, leading to more complications like heart disease and stroke. Somewhere in the world, it takes a life every 6 seconds. The reason why this advert is so scary is the only word that changes on the right is sugar. Sugar does exactly the same things. And this was an advert that was done by the Diabetes Association of Sri Lanka back in 2013. Sugar is now the equivalent of cigarettes. Cigarettes have already started to I don't believe that it's dangerous and passive smoking and all the rest of it. But we seem to have a lot of food and sugar. And this is just laying it out now that the two are the same. We now need to start to think of sugar in the same way as we're thinking about cigarettes and what that might mean for us. So that's about food. What about lifestyle and what about exercise? Sarah?
Okay, just a quick overview from me. So, for those who don't know, at Tameside, we have 8 leisure facilities across Tameside, 6 kind of main pools and gyms, and then 2 separate pools. We're kind of just known for our gym and maybe our swimming, but not very well known for a lot of the other wider stuff that we do as well in the community. So I mentioned the swimming. We've got a massive kind of school swimming programme and learn to swim programme, so helping our youngsters learn those real basic life survival skills within the water. And we've also got a massive gymnastics provision as well, so right from your gym tots and your babies right until the elite side of gymnastics as well. We've got a huge coaching in schools programme, so the majority of our Tameside primary schools, the PE element is run by Active Tameside, and we have professional coaches that go in there and run that as well. And then some of the other stuff that we don't really shout about that much. We teamed up really closely with Adult Care Services, and we run dementia day sessions and adult care social sessions within our buildings. And within that, they come for the day with some of the carers and the users. Might do some swimming, some sports, but we also have a life skills kitchen as well, where they learn how to cook, how to clean, how to do their own washing, how to do their own ironing, things like that. So we have all that kind of going on within our buildings as well, and we're looking at establishing those relationships and expanding that in Tameside. We understand the massive reach that we do have in Tameside and the impacts we're kind of already having on the health and well-being of the population, but we recognise that we can do so much more. And so recently we've got, which is why I'm really pleased to say, I'm really excited to lead on some new health programmes that we're working on at the moment, to help our residents become not just about physically active, but better in their own management of the self-care. And the main programmes really, we're working right from early years, so 0 to 5, looking at school readiness, that physical literacy, making sure that they're able to enter school at the right kind of stage and with the right social and motor development skills that they need. And we know that we do that through a lot of play and the social sessions, so we're looking at opening up that offer and providing it a little bit more targeted as well out in the community. We are really pleased to announce that we're going to be introducing a pre and postnatal exercise programme as well, because as I'm a mum of 2, got a little boy who's 18 months old, and physically active all the way through pregnancy, luckily I was able to. But I found as well, there's not a lot out there specific, and there's a lot of misguidance around what a pregnant woman should do or shouldn't do with regards to exercise. So that's the kind of new area we're looking at developing within Tameside. And then the last two really are, the last two is a more of a later life programme, so looking at from your fits and 50s right up to your falls prevention, and looking at that pathway and understanding that I went to a workshop last week with Age UK, and it's about how you brand something like that, because a lot of our older adults don't identify as being an older adult or in need of falls prevention. So it's rebranding that and making it into something a bit more fun and a bit more accessible as well. We recognise the importance of that. And then finally, the programme that we're launching right now and we're working on at the moment is a long-term conditions programme. So looking at providing more condition-specific physical activity solutions for people who have got and living with long-term conditions, and how we can give them specialist one-to-one support, but also in a group scenario, because we understand exercising on your own is a bit boring and you're less likely to do it for a long time. If we keep that social support in the group, and fun sessions as well, trips out, so much so that the exercise almost becomes a byproduct of coming together as a group with like-minded people, and we recognise that there's much more retention and people are more likely to stay in the activity for longer. And then finally, the last thing that we are looking at, I don't know if some of you might get the Tameside reporter. We launched it, we've just had, I think we're on our 3rd edition now of the Live Well Feel Great page that we have in the report. It's every 2 weeks. And in that, we want to showcase local people who are inspirational. So people who've either, lost a lot of weight or been volunteering or doing something, living with a certain condition and actively managing that. And we realise that role models in society, who's more likely to inspire you to take care of yourself and manage self-care? Is it going to be someone who looks like a poster girl or a poster boy? Or is it someone who you kind of know from down the road, who's actually, you're understanding their story, actually, they've got something that my mum's got or that my auntie's got, and actually they can do something to help, and that inspires me as well to do that. So we're really looking for those inspirational stories so that we can showcase them and hopefully help others in Tameside as well.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to labour the point. We've already heard about health pledge, and I assume that every single one of you, including me, is going to do a health pledge today, because I think it's incredibly important that actually every one of us does a little small thing. It could make such a big difference for us all. Even like yesterday I only did about 1,100 steps, and I did about 1,100 steps. Well, today, just walking up to the swimming pool and back, my phone is saying I've done about 4,000 steps. So I've done 4 times more walking today than I did yesterday. So I'd like to thank Richard for allowing me, enabling me to do a lot more than I can normally.
Give it your microphone.
Yeah.
There you are, so it's joy work. But we've got a real challenge, and I love this slide. It's a very busy slide, but basically it was done by Barclays Bank, and they were looking at the generations of people. This is the challenge that we have got as GPs within the community. There are 5 different types of generations, if you like. So there's a generation, the maturists, who were born before 1945. I'm not going to go through the whole slide, but they make up about 3% of the workforce. This was in 2013, I should say. Their aspiration was to own a home. They're largely disengaged from technology. They've always wanted a job for life. Their signature product was a was a car. Their preferred communication method was a letter handwritten sent to them. They prefer to communicate face to face. And if there's something really important, they really want to talk to that person face to face. It's not even the telephone or anything else like that. Now, there are 5 other generations. I'm not going to go through them all, but what I am going to do is just look at Generation Y, which is 1981 to 1995. And that particular group now make up 29% of the workforce. Their aspiration is freedom and flexibility. They are digital natives. They're used to using tablets and smartphones. They're texting and using social media. They like online and mobile for communication, but if it's something really important, they really want the face-to-face. And then you've got this group, Generation Z, that were born after 1995. Now this group are currently employed in either part-time jobs or new apprenticeships. They want security and stability as opposed to their home ownership. They're technoholics, so they love IT type stuff. They're using FaceTime, they like Facebook. They like FaceTime and Skype and everything. But what's really interesting is whereas this group want to meet with the doctor and have a face-to-face, they would much rather engage with a wider social community, find out what everybody else is doing and follow them. And the challenge that we've got as a GP service, as in fact a public health sector, is how do you deliver a service for 2 quite disparate groups of people, and everyone else is sort of somewhere in the middle. Now that's the challenge that we're now facing, and we're seeing that if you reach out to this group, and this group feel just disenfranchised, if you continue to deliver this kind of service, well, here's the new order, if you like, and their voice is becoming louder and louder, particularly because of the social media stuff. So we've got a real challenge around how do we transition from an old way of working to a new way of working, back to that thing about trust, about responsibility, and about partnership working. So how have we gone about doing it, and what are we recommending for practices out there? Well, clearly, in the medical profession, unless you get the clinicians on board, it ain't going to happen. So we need to get the clinicians in a room and start to engage with them and start to see what they think about what's required. It's very, very hard to make progress without the support of clinicians. And that's just me talking about things from having been involved in lots of programs of work in the NHS. Clinicians aren't very good at delivering services, so we can't do it on our own. So we do need the management team together. So in a practice, that means getting your clinicians together and getting your managers, your practice management team together, so that they're talking to one another and starting to think about some of these issues. However, there's a third group, and the third group that's incredibly important, to my mind, at least at a GP level, are your patient participation groups. At a community level, I agree with what Brian's saying, it's not just PPGs, it's the wider community and everybody else. But at a practice level, in order to make records access and other things happen like that, this is the model that's going to be needed. Clinicians, managers and patient group within the practice engaging with each other and thinking about what it means for them and what are they going to do? What are the clinicians going to do? What are the managers going to do? And what are the patient participation groups going to do? Okay, so let's just take things further. We've heard a little bit about Devo Mank today. Very briefly, there's 2.8 million people across Greater Manchester, and they've got the opportunity now to devolve budgets so that there is less regulatory control, and there is the opportunity for the population of Greater Manchester to be able to improve their health and get better outcomes. And I completely recognise that I'm sat in Glossop at the moment, recognising that it's not part of Devo Mank, but as a CCG board member, we absolutely need to think about yourself as well. There are going to be a lot of documents, but this is one that's just been published on Wednesday, and it's by the Transforming Primary Care team, which is part of the Devo Mank thing. And patient record access is the guide that's been produced that is now going to be taken across Greater Manchester to all the GP practices and things. And it's a blueprint, it's the start of how we go about doing this. I've always said the key to this is getting consent right. What's very important is there should be no surprises. If you don't have surprises, you'll gain trust, you'll start to move forward. So getting the consent right for access to records, and that's really what this guide is about, recognising how we can get the consent right to enable patients to access their records. But the vision will be for the population of Greater Manchester increasingly to be able to access their records and understand them and take them forward. So, what do I think partnership and responsibility means when we're thinking about planning for our health in the future? Well, first and foremost, we've got to tap into those lived experiences of the very people that we're thinking about. And when I think about lived experiences, it's not just patients. I'm particularly thinking about those from protected groups. So I'm thinking about, for instance, people who are refugees, asylum seekers, people with learning difficulties, people with severe mental health issues, people that perhaps have been involved in the drugs and misuse services or whatever, or in the prison service and have come out. These are people who've generally been on the outskirts of society, whose voices are often not heard, and consequently their outcomes are a lot worse. Actually, if we can improve things for that group of people, the chances are it will also improve for all of us. If you've ever seen guides that have been produced, which are pictorial guides with pictures on them, they're done for children of the age of 8 or 9 or whatever. Increasingly, we're finding that the general population finds it's easier to read those sorts of things than the sort of huge, big, heavy documents that we have. I've talked about partnership of trust. I think this is incredibly important. This is how we're going to move from where we are to where we want to be. Building this partnership of trust, responsibility and behaviour, shared decision making. I think if people are going to improve their health and well-being, they need to know where they're starting from. And within that GP record, when you register with your GP and you see your practice nurse and they're checking your smoking status, how much you're drinking, your height and weight, whatever you got, the keys are there. Even if you think there's nothing wrong with you, the keys are there for us to start to think about the kinds of things that we could do to improve our own health and chances. I think increasingly the opportunity of being able to access services through the online creates new opportunities. It creates risks as well, but actually if we manage those risks, we could actually find that services become much, much more responsive to needs. If you think about how long it takes to write a letter, put a stamp on and send it through the post, and then think about how I was tweeting this morning, and then within minutes we got a reply back about the question about are patients free. That came in through social media. We simply could not have been able to do that in the old ways of working. But start to think about, what about if healthcare services could respond in a similar kind of way? I'm not saying it should be through Twitter, but thinking about how we might be able to do that. But to do that, it's really going to be important that we start to raise the health literacy. If people just start shouting, I want, the system's going to fall apart. But actually, if we can raise the health literacy of the community so that people feel that they know what to do, they know how to manage, but they also know when to shout for help. And when they shout for help, there will be a responsive service that will come back to them and not say to them, come back in 3 weeks' time. We can improve things. To do that, we're going to need to start thinking about how we activate people. And there's this idea of patient activation measures. We know that a more activated patient has better outcomes and uses up less resources, even at the end of life. In a similar kind of way, and there are now patient activation measures, a lot of patients are coming to me and saying, Doctor, I've been to my GP and he doesn't seem at all interested. And I'm starting to begin to realise that just in the same ways we can have patient activation measures, guess what? I bet you there are clinician activation measures as well. And there may well be clinicians who are completely switched off. So even though you're super excited, yes, I want to do this, and you go and see a clinician and they're super unexcited about it and inactivated. So we now need to start thinking about how we can activate clinicians, and especially in a world where there's austerity and there isn't much money. And then also, it's no good having a clinician that's super excited and a patient that's super excited if the manager isn't as well. So we also need to start thinking. Now increasingly, my own personal view is managers are quite activated. They're just wanting to say, well, how can we get the clinicians on board and how can we get the patients on board? But again, you can see there, can't you, that there's a complex mixture going on. How do we bring all three together? And then this idea of the professional roles, and I put this in speech marks because professional tended to mean the doctor or the nurse. But actually, we've now got a patient director for the first time. I think he might be employed in the NHS. David Gilbert, does anyone know? No? We've got a patient director. Yeah. David Gilbert's just become a patient director. But that's a professional role as a patient. Nobody really knows what that means, a patient leader or whatever. We've got a number here. So I'm just wondering if you want to come along and maybe at the end of the presentation talk a little bit about your role and how you see it as a patient representative. But roles are changing, and I think that's another part of the change and starting to think about how the future could be. This idea of moving it away from healthcare services and social care services and starting to think about the assets that exist in the community that you can look up to and you can go and learn from. And for us within health and social care to think about how we can support those assets, make them more visible so that people can see them as being pillars of this society rather than just a speech on a screen. And then starting to think about, is it access that people want or is it continuity? A lot of the patients that I'm coming across, particularly if they've got long-term conditions and complex problems, are saying, I don't want to see anybody. I want to see somebody who knows me, who knows my situation, who knows my family. So is it simply about getting access or continuity, or is it both? Or is it a bit of each? And we need to start to get into that conversation around what is it that you really feel you need. And finally, this idea of social media, it's here, it's taking off massively. It means that whereas it took 70 years for all of us to have televisions in our room, now if you take something like texting, it took 5 years. If you take something like WhatsApp, that's happened from within a year. Within a year, it's gone from nothing to almost everybody using it. What we're seeing is the adoption of technology is happening much, much more quickly than it ever has. And then finally, moving away from this idea of a target-based culture where a board, an organisation has to achieve a target, moving away from that to starting to think about the values. What values do you have? What values do we in the NHS have? And how do we reach out and ensure that your values are looked after rather than just trying to reach a target? That change is happening. How can we get involved? How can we support that change? How can you get involved in that? So finally, we've just published our minutes, our accounts for our CCG. And here is Ian Kenworthy. He's a patient who had asthma from when he was born. He went on to develop very severe COPD. Back in December, he got admitted into hospital with an acute exacerbation of his COPD. He was discharged, but he was discharged early. He had an exacerbation, but fortunately, he was able to contact the specialist respiratory nurse. She was able to monitor him because he checked his own saturations and pulses and things. And he was able to send that data back to the specialist nurse as well as his GP. And as a result of that, he was able to manage his exacerbation at home without having to be readmitted into hospital. It was a bit ropey. It could have been done better. He wasn't seen by a consultant respiratory physician before he was discharged. We know we need to improve things. How are we going to do that? Well, we've got to start to recognise that the patient and that family are the experts. And what we've got to do is start to try and think about how we can support their needs, how can we improve the quality of care, how can we feel as though they are getting a wraparound service that supports them, that we are listening to rather than doing things to. How can we give them access to their records so they can understand what it means? How can we ensure that the new respiratory service is there to support their needs rather than to take them over and stop doing things to them and work with them? The detail of all that is on there, and I'll send you the detail, and that's the page from our account. And so finally, what I'd really like us to think about is how can we move away today, and those of you watching on the internet at the moment, think about how do we become committed to being a better person today than I was yesterday, with better thoughts, better decisions and better actions. Thank you very much.